The gun pressed cold against my temple, and in that moment, I saw his face transform into something I had never witnessed before. The gentleman who had sat in my section every morning, who had smiled so warmly while feeding scrambled eggs to his twin daughters, was gone. In his place stood a demon wrapped in expensive Italian silk, his eyes burning with a fury that could incinerate worlds. "Touch her again," he said, his voice barely above a whisper, "and I will personally ensure your family spends the next decade identifying your remains." I should have been terrified. I should have been screaming. But all I could think about was how wrong I had been. How catastrophically, devastatingly wrong. His name was Damien Valerio. And the man I had been falling in love with was the most dangerous mafia boss on the eastern seaboard. But I'm getting ahead of myself. If you really want to understand how a simple waitress from the wrong side of Millbrook ended up with a gun to her head and a mob king ready to burn down an empire for her, you need to go back. Back to the morning when everything changed. Back to the moment I first saw him beaming, holding those precious twin girls like they were the only light left in his dark, dark world. Before we dive deeper into this story, I need to know something. Where are you watching this from right now? Drop your location in the comments below. I want to see how far this story reaches. And if you haven't already, hit that subscribe button right now. Trust me, you're going to want to be here for what happens next. This is a story that will stay with you long after it ends. My name is Serafina Vance. Everyone calls me Sarah. At 26 years old, I had exactly 3 things to my name: a studio apartment with a radiator that worked only when it felt like it, a rusted Honda Civic with 200,000 miles on the odometer, and a job at Rosalind's Diner that paid just enough to keep me one step ahead of complete poverty. I wasn't always this way. There was a time when I had dreams bigger than the grease-stained apron I wore every day. I had been accepted to Juilliard for vocal performance. I had a scholarship, a future, a plan. But plans, as I learned the hard way, are just stories we tell ourselves to feel like we have control over a universe that couldn't care less about our hopes. My mother got sick. Pancreatic cancer, stage 4. The kind that doesn't negotiate, doesn't give second chances. The medical bills came first, then the funeral costs, then the collectors who circled like vultures over what remained of my family's modest savings. My father had left when I was 7, vanished like morning fog, so there was no one else. Just me. I dropped out before my first semester ended. Came back to Millbrook. Started waiting tables. That was 4 years ago. The morning I met Damien Valerio, I had exactly $47 in my bank account, a landlord threatening eviction, and a prayer that the breakfast rush would bring in enough tips to cover my electricity bill. The sky outside was that particular shade of gray that November brings to small towns, the kind that seeps into your bones and makes you wonder if the sun was just something you dreamed up. Rosalind's Diner was a relic from the 1950s, all chrome fixtures and red leather booths that had seen better decades. Rosalind herself had passed away years ago, but the new owner, a grumpy Serbian man named Bogdan, had kept the name because changing the sign would cost money. I respected his commitment to frugality, even as I resented the way he docked our pay for broken dishes. The bell above the door chimed at exactly 7:47 in the morning. I know the time because I had been staring at the clock, willing the hands to move faster toward the end of my double shift. When I turned around, coffee pot in hand, I nearly dropped it. He stood in the doorway like something from a different world entirely. Tall, over 6 feet, with shoulders that suggested he had never missed a day at whatever exclusive gym he belonged to. His hair was dark, almost black, swept back from a face that seemed carved from something harder than mere flesh. But it wasn't his appearance that stopped me cold. It was the babies. He held one in each arm, 2 identical little girls who couldn't have been more than 18 months old. They had his dark hair, but their eyes were a startling shade of green, like spring leaves just unfurling. One was sleeping peacefully against his chest. The other was awake, her tiny fingers wrapped around his collar, staring at the diner with the wide-eyed wonder that only children possess. And he was smiling at them. Not a polite smile. Not the performative grimace I saw on most men who found themselves responsible for small humans. This was a smile of pure, unfiltered adoration. The kind of smile that transformed his severe features into something breathtaking. Something almost holy. "Anywhere's fine," I managed to say, surprised my voice still worked. He looked up at me, and something passed across his face. A flicker of recognition, though I was certain I had never seen this man before in my life. Then it was gone, replaced by a warm politeness that seemed at odds with the sharp cut of his jawline. "Thank you. Perhaps somewhere quiet? The girls are overdue for their breakfast, and Sophia here has opinions about waiting." His voice was deep, with an accent I couldn't quite place. Italian, maybe, but refined through years of expensive education. The kind of voice that belonged in boardrooms and penthouses, not in a small-town diner where the most expensive item on the menu was a $12 steak. I led him to the corner booth, the one by the window that got the best light. As he settled in, somehow managing to keep both babies secure while sliding into the worn leather seat, I found myself lingering. "She's beautiful," I said, nodding toward the awake twin who was now studying me with unsettling intensity. "They both are. They have their mother's eyes," he said, and something in his voice cracked. Just for a moment. Just enough for me to understand that whoever their mother was, she was gone. Not temporarily. Permanently. "I'm sorry," I said, because there was nothing else to say. He looked at me then, really looked at me, and I felt exposed in a way I couldn't explain. Like he was seeing past the tired circles under my eyes, past the fraying uniform, past all the disappointments that had accumulated like sediment in my soul. "You have nothing to apologize for," he said softly. "But thank you." I took his order. Pancakes for him, baby oatmeal for the twins. Black coffee, the strongest we had. Simple, ordinary requests that somehow felt weighted with meaning. As I poured his coffee, the sleeping twin stirred and began to fuss. Without thinking, I reached out and gently stroked her cheek, making a soft shushing sound I remembered my mother using when I was small. The baby quieted immediately, her green eyes blinking open to stare at me before drifting closed again. "You're good with them," he observed, his voice carrying something like surprise. "I used to babysit in high school," I said. "Before life got complicated." "Life has a talent for complication," he agreed. Then, almost to himself, he added, "Sometimes I forget there are people who are simply kind. No agenda. No angle. Just kindness." I didn't know what to say to that. So I just smiled and went to put in his order. That was how it started. Him, showing up every morning at 7:47 with his twin daughters. Me, serving him pancakes and baby oatmeal and enough black coffee to fuel a small army. We would talk, sometimes just for a few minutes, sometimes for longer when the breakfast rush allowed. He told me the twins' names were Luna and Sienna, that Luna was the calm one and Sienna had inherited what he called the Valerio temper. He asked about me, too. Genuinely asked, in a way that made me feel like my answers mattered. I told him about Juilliard, about my mother, about the way dreams sometimes dissolve like sugar in hot water. He listened without judgment, without offering empty platitudes or unwanted advice. "You still sing," he said one morning, after I had been humming while wiping down tables. "Sometimes. In the shower. When no one's listening." "The best songs are the ones sung when no one's listening," he said. "They're the truest." I should have wondered about him. Should have questioned why a man who wore watches that cost more than my annual salary was spending every morning in a rundown diner in Millbrook. Should have asked about the black SUVs that always parked outside when he was there, the suited men who sat in separate booths and watched the doors with predatory attention. But I didn't wonder. I didn't question. I just fell. Slowly, imperceptibly, and then all at once. 2 months passed in a rhythm that became the heartbeat of my days. Every morning, the same. The bell chiming, his tall frame filling the doorway, the twins reaching for me with chubby arms once they recognized my face. Sienna started saying my name, or her version of it. Sawa. She would chant it while banging her spoon against the high chair Bogdan had begrudgingly brought out from storage after the third week. Luna remained quieter, more observant. She would watch me with those green eyes, tracking my movements with an intelligence that seemed beyond her months. When I sang to her while waiting for tables to clear, she would go completely still, her tiny face rapt with attention. "She's a listener," Damien said one morning, watching the interaction. Like her mother was. It was the first time he had spoken of their mother in present context. I waited, not pushing, understanding that grief moves at its own pace. "Catalina," he said finally, the name falling from his lips like a prayer. "She died during childbirth. Complications. The doctors said it was 1 in a million, a tragedy no one could have predicted." His jaw tightened. "I have spent the last 18 months wishing I could have traded places with her. Wishing I could have been the one to go." "The twins need you," I said quietly. "They need their father. She would have wanted you to be here for them." He looked at me with something raw in his eyes. "You say that with such certainty." "Because I know what it's like to lose a mother." I was with mine at the end, held her hand when she took her last breath. And the only thing that made any of it bearable was knowing she wasn't worried about me. That she trusted I would be okay. I paused, surprised by how easily the words came. "Your wife would have wanted the same for you. To know you would be okay. That the girls would be okay." Something shifted in his expression. The careful walls he maintained, the polished distance I had sensed from the beginning, cracked just slightly. "You are quite remarkable, Serafina Vance." No one had ever called me remarkable before. Not my high school teachers who saw potential I never fulfilled. Not the admissions committee at Juilliard who had praised my talent before I abandoned it. Not the string of forgettable men I had dated in my early 20s, who saw me as a pit stop on their way to wherever they were really going. But when Damien Valerio said it, looking at me with those dark eyes that seemed to hold oceans of secrets, I almost believed it. The diner became our sanctuary. A bubble outside of time where we were simply two people sharing coffee and conversation while two beautiful babies grew to trust me. I learned that Damien ran import-export businesses that required him to travel frequently. That he had relocated to Millbrook to escape the pressures of his work, to give his daughters something resembling a normal childhood. That he had no family left, no parents, no siblings, no one except a few loyal friends who were more like brothers. I told him about my father's abandonment, about the scholarship I had surrendered, about the way I sometimes woke up in the middle of the night convinced I could hear my mother calling my name. He never tried to fix me, never offered solutions or silver linings. He just listened, really listened, in a way that made me feel seen for the first time in years. "You should sing again," he said one afternoon when the lunch rush had died down and I was sitting across from him, stealing a moment before Bogdan noticed. "Professionally. You have a gift. Gifts don't pay rent. Gifts don't put food on the table." "They could," he said, and there was something in his voice that made me uneasy. "I know people. People who could help you. I don't need charity." "It wouldn't be charity. It would be recognizing talent and providing opportunity." He leaned forward, intensity radiating from him. "You deserve more than this, Sarah. More than a dead-end job in a diner that doesn't appreciate you. More than an apartment you can barely afford. More than scraping by while your dreams collect dust. You don't know what I deserve." "I know exactly what you deserve," he said softly. "I just don't know if I'm the one who should give it to you." I didn't understand what he meant. Not then. The first crack in the fantasy appeared on a Thursday. The diner was unusually busy, and I was handling the morning rush alone because my coworker had called in sick. Damien arrived at his usual time, but instead of sitting in his regular booth, he hesitated at the door. Behind him, I could see 3 of the suited men who usually waited outside, their expressions tense, their hands hovering near their waists in a way that made my stomach clench. "We should go," one of them said. Not a request. A statement. Damien's face had transformed. The warmth was gone, replaced by something cold and calculating. He turned to the man, and when he spoke, his voice was ice. "I said I would have breakfast. I am having breakfast. Unless you'd like to explain to the Cardenas family why their shipment was delayed because you couldn't wait 30 minutes. The man paled. Actually paled, like someone had drained the blood from his face. He stepped back, nodding jerkily. Damien turned back to me, and in an instant the warmth returned. "Apologies for the disruption. The usual, please." But I had seen. The glimpse behind the mask, brief as it was, had been enough to plant a seed of doubt that would grow into something I couldn't ignore. That night, I did something I should have done months ago. I searched for him online. Damien Valerio. The name returned results that made my blood run cold. Articles from major newspapers. FBI investigations. Grand jury testimonies. The Valerio crime family, one of the most powerful organized crime operations in the country. Money laundering. Racketeering. Weapons trafficking. And at the head of it all, having assumed control after his father's death 5 years prior, was the man who had been sharing pancakes with me every morning. The man whose daughters called me Sawa. I scrolled through photos. Damien in handcuffs after an arrest that led to no charges. Damien exiting courtrooms surrounded by lawyers in suits that probably cost more than my car. Damien at charity galas, shaking hands with politicians who would later deny ever knowing him. And then, the worst one. A crime scene photo that had leaked to the press, showing the aftermath of what the article called a message to rival families. Bodies on the ground. Blood on concrete. And in the background, barely visible, a black SUV identical to the ones that parked outside Rosalind's diner every morning. I closed my laptop. Went to the bathroom. Threw up until there was nothing left. I should have been angry. Should have felt betrayed, manipulated, lied to. But the emotion that overwhelmed everything else was grief. Grief for what I had thought was building between us. Grief for the man I had believed him to be, the gentle father who spoke of his late wife with reverence, who listened to my rambling stories about a life that must have seemed so small compared to his. All of it had been a lie. Hadn't it? I didn't sleep that night. Or the next. By the time morning came and 7:47 approached, I had made my decision. I wasn't going to confront him. Wasn't going to make a scene or demand explanations. I was simply going to quit. Tell Bogdan I had found another job, pack up my meager belongings, and disappear. Millbrook wasn't that far from the next town over. I could start fresh. Again. But when the bell chimed and I turned around, I saw something that shattered my resolve into 1,000 pieces. Damien stood in the doorway, but he wasn't alone. Luna was in his arms, crying hysterically, her face red and streaked with tears. And he looked destroyed. Devastated. Like someone had reached into his chest and ripped out whatever was left of his heart. "Sienna," he said, his voice breaking. "She's sick. The doctors don't know what's wrong. They don't know if she's going to be okay. I think sometimes about the choices that define us. The moments when we could go one way or another, when the path forks and we have to decide who we want to be. Here's my question to you, and I genuinely want to know your answer. If you discovered someone you cared about had been hiding a terrible truth, but then saw them at their most vulnerable, most broken, most human, what would you do? Would you walk away, protect yourself from the darkness? Or would you stay, understanding that people are more than their worst sins? Drop your answer in the comments below. I need to know I'm not alone in how I struggled with this choice. I didn't walk away. I couldn't. Luna was reaching for me, screaming my name in that garbled way toddlers do. And Damien, the most dangerous man I had ever stood in front of, was crying. Not sobbing, nothing that dramatic. Just silent tears tracking down his face as he held his daughter and faced the possibility of losing another person he loved. "Let me come with you," I heard myself say. He looked at me with something like wonder. "You don't know." "I know enough. Right now, I know enough. Let me come with you." The hospital was not the kind you see in movies, with crowded waiting rooms and overworked staff rushing through fluorescent-lit hallways. This was a private facility, the kind that existed for people with enough money to buy healthcare that resembled a luxury hotel. Marble floors. Original artwork on the walls. Private rooms that looked more like suites at the Four Seasons. Sienna lay in a crib that was monitored by machines I couldn't name, her tiny body attached to wires and tubes that seemed obscenely invasive for someone so small. Her breathing was labored, her skin pale, her green eyes closed in a sleep that was too still, too quiet. "It started 2 days ago," Damien said, standing at the window, his back to the room as if he couldn't bear to look at her. "A fever. We thought it was nothing, just a cold. But it kept climbing. Then the seizures started." "Seizures?" My voice came out strangled. "2 so far. They've run every test. They don't know what's causing it." He finally turned, and the despair on his face was almost too much to bear. "I have all the money in the world, Sarah. I have power that most people can't imagine. But I can't fix this. I can't protect her from this. I can't do anything but stand here and wait for someone to tell me if my daughter is going to live or die." Luna was in my arms, her crying reduced to hiccuping whimpers as she sensed the gravity of the situation in the way children somehow can. I held her tighter, pressing my cheek against her dark hair. "She's going to be okay," I said, not because I knew it was true, but because hope was the only thing I could offer. Damien looked at me with eyes that held the weight of worlds. "You found out. About me. About what I am." It wasn't a question. Of course he knew. A man like him probably knew everything. "I searched for you online," I admitted. "Last night. And yet you're here." "Yes." "Why?" I thought about the question. Really thought about it, standing in that room that smelled of antiseptic and money, holding a baby whose father had likely ordered men killed. "Because I've seen monsters," I said finally. "Real ones. The kind who hurt children. Who prey on the weak. Who take pleasure in causing pain." I met his gaze, refusing to look away. "You are many terrible things, Damien Valerio. But you are not that. You love these girls more than life itself. And right now, you need someone. So I'm here." Something broke in him then. The careful control he maintained, the armor he wore even in his most vulnerable moments, simply crumpled. He crossed the room in 3 strides and pulled me into his arms, Luna caught between us, and he held on like I was the only thing keeping him from drowning. "I wanted to tell you," he breathed against my hair. "So many times. But every time I saw you smile at me, saw the way you treated my daughters, I couldn't bear to watch that disappear. To see the fear replace the warmth. To become the monster you're now looking at instead of the man you believed me to be." "I don't know what I'm looking at," I admitted. "I don't know who you really are. But I know who you are in that diner every morning. I know who you are with Luna and Sienna. And maybe that's enough. For now." He pulled back, cradling my face in his hands. "You should run. You should take the first bus out of this town and never look back. Every moment you spend with me puts you in danger. There are people who would hurt you just to hurt me. People who would." "I'm not running," I interrupted. "Not yet. First, we save your daughter." The doctors came and went. Specialists were flown in from New York, from Boston, from a hospital in Switzerland that specialized in pediatric rare diseases. Damien made phone calls in rapid Italian, his voice sharp and commanding in a way that reminded me of the truth I had discovered. He was a man who made things happen. A man who moved mountains not with prayers but with power. But even power has limits. 3 days in, they finally had a diagnosis. A rare autoimmune disorder, triggered by a genetic mutation that neither parent had shown symptoms of. The treatment was experimental, available only through a clinical trial in Germany. The waitlist was 18 months. Sienna didn't have 18 months. I watched Damien receive the news. Watched his face cycle through grief and rage and finally settle on something terrifyingly cold. "I need to make some calls," he said quietly. Then, to me, "Stay with her. Please." I stayed. I sang to Sienna, the lullabies my mother used to sing to me. I held Luna and told her stories about a magical kingdom where little girls never got sick and fathers never had to cry. I watched the monitors and prayed to a God I wasn't sure I believed in anymore. Damien was gone for 6 hours. When he returned, he looked different. Older. Like the weight of whatever he had done had aged him years in an afternoon. "She's in the trial," he said. "We leave for Germany tomorrow." "How?" "Don't ask questions you don't want answers to." I should have pushed. Should have demanded to know what bargain he had struck, what price he had paid, what violence might have occurred to secure his daughter's place on that list. But Luna was asleep in my arms, and Sienna's breathing had steadied slightly, and I was too exhausted to be righteous. "I'm coming with you," I said. He shook his head. "You can't. This isn't a vacation, Sarah. This is going into a world you don't understand, surrounded by people who would see your kindness as weakness to exploit. Luna needs me. She's been reaching for me since the moment we got here. She cries when I'm not in the room. And you need someone to help with her while you focus on Sienna." I stood, carefully transferring Luna to her portable crib. "I'm not asking permission. I'm telling you I'm coming." A ghost of a smile crossed his face. "You would have made a terrifying Mafia wife. I'm a terrifying waitress. Upgrade with caution." Germany was both everything I expected and nothing I could have imagined. We flew private, of course, on a jet that was nicer than any apartment I had ever lived in. Luna slept through most of the flight, exhausted from the chaos of the past week. I sat by the window, watching clouds drift past, trying to process how my life had transformed so completely in such a short time. Damien sat across from me, Sienna in his arms, her tiny body curled against his chest. She was stable but weak, saving her strength for the battle ahead. "Thank you," he said quietly. "For what?" "For not judging me. Or rather, for judging me fairly. For seeing the monster but staying anyway. I never called you a monster. You didn't have to. I saw it in your eyes when you walked into the hospital. That moment of hesitation. The question of whether you were making the worst mistake of your life. Am I?" He was quiet for a long moment. "Probably," he admitted. "I have enemies who would destroy anything I love. I have a legacy of blood that stretches back generations. I have done things that would give you nightmares if you knew the details." He looked at me, and there was something vulnerable in his gaze that I had never seen before. "But I am trying. For them. To be better than what I was born into. To build something that doesn't require violence to maintain. Is that possible? In your world?" "I don't know," he said honestly. "But I have to try. Because I look at my daughters, and I think about the world they'll inherit, and I can't bear the thought of them growing up surrounded by the darkness that raised me." The treatment center in Munich was hidden behind the facade of a private estate in the Bavarian countryside. Security was tight, the staff was hand-picked, and every patient was someone whose family had either wealth beyond imagining or secrets worth protecting. Often both. For 6 weeks, we lived in a suspended reality. Sienna underwent treatment after treatment, her tiny body fighting with a tenacity that brought doctors to tears. Luna adapted with the resilience of children, turning the estate's gardens into her personal kingdom. And Damien and I orbited each other like binary stars, pulled together by gravity but never quite colliding. Until the night everything changed. It was the 38th day when I woke to find my door open and a stranger standing in my room. He was tall, thin, with the kind of face that looked like it had never smiled in its entire existence. In his hand was a gun, the black metal glinting in the moonlight that streamed through the window. "Don't scream," he said, his accent thick and Eastern European. "If you scream, the children die first." Terror flooded through me, cold and paralyzing. Luna was in the next room. Luna, who had just learned to say my name properly. Luna, who had no idea that her father's sins were about to rain down on her innocent head. "What do you want?" My voice was remarkably steady, considering. "I want what everyone wants from Damien Valerio. I want him to suffer. I want him to know what it feels like to lose everything he loves." The man smiled, and it was the most terrifying thing I had ever seen. His wife was a start. Now, his daughters. And you. His wife. Catalina. The woman who had died in childbirth. "Complications," Damien had said. A tragedy no one could have predicted. But as I looked at this man's face, at the satisfaction gleaming in his eyes, I understood with horrible clarity that it hadn't been an accident. That Sienna and Luna's mother had been murdered, and no one had ever known. "You killed her," I breathed. "I weakened her. A little poison, slow-acting, designed to cause exactly what it caused." The beauty of it was that he never suspected. He blamed fate. Blamed God. Blamed himself. The man stepped closer, and I could smell tobacco and something metallic on his breath. "But you, my dear, he will know exactly who is responsible for. I want him to live with that knowledge. I want him to spend the rest of his life knowing that everyone he loves dies because of him." I thought of Luna, sleeping peacefully in her crib. I thought of Sienna, recovering slowly in her hospital room. I thought of Damien, who carried the weight of an empire and had still found room to be tender with his daughters. I wasn't going to let this man destroy them. "He already knows," I lied, my voice steady despite the hammering of my heart. "He's known for months. Why do you think he brought me along?" "Insurance. There are 15 armed guards in this facility, and they've been waiting for you to make your move." Confusion flickered across the man's face. Just for a moment. Just long enough. I dove for the alarm button on the nightstand, a feature of every room in the estate that connected directly to the security center. My finger found it just as his hand closed around my throat, lifting me off my feet. "Nice try," he snarled. "But I disabled the alarm system before I came upstairs. No one is coming to save you." Black spots danced in my vision. I clawed at his hands, my lungs screaming for air. This was it. This was how I died. Not from cancer like my mother, not from poverty or exhaustion, but from the violence of a world I had willingly entered. But then I heard it. A sound that cut through the roaring in my ears. A click, metallic and final. "Remove your hands from her," Damien's voice said, cold as the grave, "or I will paint this room with your brain matter." The pressure on my throat disappeared. I collapsed to the floor, gasping, vision swimming as oxygen flooded back into my system. Through the blur, I saw Damien standing in the doorway, still in his pajamas, a gun in each hand and an expression on his face that I would never, as long as I lived, forget. He wasn't the gentle father from the diner. He wasn't the grieving widower who spoke of his wife with tears in his eyes. He was something older, darker, more dangerous than I had ever imagined. He was death walking. "Casimir Petrov," Damien said, the name dripping with venom. "I should have known. You were always too stupid to know when to stop." "I'm not the one who's stupid," the man, Casimir, replied. "You're the one who thought you could escape what you are. Thought you could play house with a waitress while empires burned. Is that what this is about?" Business? This is about my brother, who you killed in Prague. This is about my father, who died in prison because of your testimony. This is about the Petrov family, which you decimated for the crime of competing with your precious Valerio dynasty. Your brother was smuggling children, Damien said, his voice eerily calm. Your father was a monster who deserved worse than what he got. And your family's empire was built on the suffering of innocents. I would destroy you 1,000 times over and feel nothing but satisfaction. Casimir laughed, a sound like breaking glass. You think you're any different? You think your money is clean? You've killed just as many. You've destroyed just as much. The only difference is you wrap it in pretty words like justice and necessity. The difference, Damien said, is that I will never harm a child. I will never trade in human beings. And I will never, ever forgive what you did to my wife. The room went still. Casimir's face paled. You knew, he whispered. I suspected. I spent 18 months gathering proof. And now I have it. Damien's fingers tightened on the guns. Your associate in Vienna, the one who supplied the poison? He sang beautifully before he died. Told me everything. Names. Dates. The pathetically small amount of money it took to buy him. So kill me, Casimir said, his voice regaining some of its bravado. I'm already dead. But know this, Valerio, your children will never be safe. There are others. An army of people who want you to suffer. I know, Damien said. Which is why I'm not going to kill you. Not yet. First, you're going to tell me every name. Every ally. Every safe house and bank account and hidden resource. And then, when I've dismantled everything you've ever built, when everyone who ever worked with you is dead or in prison, when the Petrov name is nothing but ash in memory, then I will kill you. Slowly. And I will enjoy every moment. The next few hours were a blur. Security flooded the estate. Casimir was taken somewhere I didn't see and didn't want to imagine. The twins were checked, rechecked, and checked again to ensure they hadn't been harmed. And I sat in my room, wrapped in a blanket, trembling so hard my teeth chattered. Damien found me there as the sun rose, golden light spilling across the floor like a mockery of peace. You should have stayed away, he said from the doorway. This is what my life is. This is what it will always be. Violence and threats and the constant fear that someone I love will be taken from me. Catalina, I said, my voice hoarse. He killed her. That man killed her. Yes. You knew. I suspected. From the beginning, something felt wrong about her death. The doctors couldn't explain why a healthy woman suddenly developed the complications she did. So I dug. I investigated. I turned over every stone until I found the truth. His voice cracked slightly. It took me 18 months, but I found it. You've been hunting him. This whole time. The reason you came to Millbrook, the reason you stayed, it was all part of. No. He crossed the room and knelt before me, taking my hands in his. Millbrook was supposed to be a hiding place. Somewhere safe where I could disappear with the girls while my people tracked Casimir. I never expected to find you. I never expected to feel anything again after losing Catalina. I looked at our intertwined hands. His were strong, capable, stained with violence that I would never fully understand. Mine were trembling, soft, stained with nothing but coffee and dishwater. What happens now? I asked. Now, I finish what I started. I dismantle the Petrov network. I eliminate every threat to my daughters. And then. He paused, something vulnerable flickering in his eyes. And then, if you'll have me, I want to build something new. Something better. Something worthy of the woman who saw my demons and stayed anyway. Damien. You don't have to answer now. You don't have to answer ever. I'm not asking for a commitment. I'm asking for a chance. The chance to prove that I'm more than the worst parts of my history. I thought about my mother, who had spent her whole life playing it safe and died anyway. I thought about the dreams I had abandoned, the life I had settled for, the years I had spent surviving instead of living. Okay, I said. Okay, what? Okay, I'll give you a chance. But there are conditions. A smile tugged at his lips, the first genuine expression I had seen from him since this nightmare began. Name them. First, no more secrets. If something threatens me or the girls, I need to know. Second, I want to finish my education. I never graduated, and it's always haunted me. Third. I hesitated. Third, I need you to promise me that when this is over, when the threats are eliminated and the empire is secure, you'll consider walking away. Not for me. For them. For Luna and Sienna, who deserve a father who isn't constantly looking over his shoulder. He was quiet for a long moment. I could see the war playing out behind his eyes, the conflict between the life he had been born into and the life he wanted to give his daughters. I'll try, he said finally. That's all I can promise. But I will try. It wasn't enough. It might never be enough. But as I looked at this broken, brilliant, dangerous man who had somehow made me feel more alive in the past few months than I had in years, I realized that sometimes, trying was the most anyone could offer. The next 18 months were the most intense of my life. We returned to the States after Sienna's treatment showed remarkable success. The experimental therapy had worked, beating back the autoimmune disorder until it was manageable, controllable, no longer a death sentence. Watching her take her first steady steps in the gardens of the Munich estate, Luna by her side, Damien crying silently as he filmed it on his phone, I understood that whatever darkness surrounded this family, there was light too. Brilliant, defiant light. But the darkness wasn't finished with us. Damien had meant what he said about dismantling the Petrov network. What I witnessed over the following months was a surgical demolition of an empire, conducted with precision and ruthlessness that should have terrified me more than it did. Bank accounts frozen. Safe houses raided. Allies turned or eliminated. One by one, the pillars that supported Casimir's organization crumbled, until there was nothing left but the man himself, imprisoned in a facility that didn't officially exist. I didn't ask about his fate. I didn't want to know. Instead, I focused on what I could control. With Damien's support, not as charity but as investment, I enrolled in an online program to complete my degree. I studied music theory, voice performance, the business side of the industry I had once dreamed of conquering. In the evenings, after the twins were asleep, I would practice in the conservatory of the estate we now called home, my voice filling the space that had once felt too grand for someone like me. Damien would listen from the doorway. Sometimes for minutes, sometimes for hours. He never interrupted. Never criticized. Just listened with an expression of such profound reverence that it made my heart ache. You should perform, he said one night, after I had finished a particularly challenging aria. Publicly. Let the world hear what I've been privileged to hear. I'm not ready. You've been ready for years. You're just afraid. He wasn't wrong. The fear of failure, of rejection, of finally reaching for my dreams only to have them slip through my fingers again, kept me tethered to safety. But safety, I was learning, was just another word for stagnation. Maybe someday, I said. I'll hold you to that. Our relationship evolved in ways I hadn't anticipated. Living together, raising the twins together, facing threats together, created an intimacy that transcended the traditional markers of romance. We weren't dating. We weren't married. We were something else entirely, something without a name, something that existed in the space between what was expected and what was real. The first time he kissed me was in the kitchen, of all places. I had been making pancakes for the girls, a callback to our diner days, when he came up behind me and wrapped his arms around my waist. What are you doing? I asked, surprised. What I've wanted to do since the moment you sang my daughter to sleep in a hospital room and made me believe in miracles again. He turned me around. Looked at me with eyes that held no secrets, no walls, nothing but raw, vulnerable want. Tell me to stop, he said. Don't stop. The kiss was everything a first kiss shouldn't be. Tentative and fierce. Tender and hungry. The culmination of months of tension and longing and carefully maintained boundaries. When we finally broke apart, both of us breathing hard, the pancakes were burning and neither of us cared. I love you, he said, the words seeming to surprise him as much as they surprised me. I don't know when it happened. I don't know how someone like me was allowed to love someone like you. But I do. Completely. Irrevocably. I love you too, I said, and it was the truest thing I had ever spoken. But love, as I was about to learn, couldn't protect us from everything. The call came 6 weeks later, in the middle of the night. A different threat, unrelated to the Petrovs. A rival family, the Cardenas organization, who had decided that Damien's absence from day-to-day operations meant weakness. They were making moves on territory. Challenging authority. Testing boundaries. I have to go, Damien said, already dressing in the dark. New York. A meeting that can't be avoided. Let someone else handle it. There is no one else. Not for this. The Cardenas patriarch, he only respects power wielded personally. If I send a representative, it signals weakness. And weakness in my world gets people killed. I watched him button his shirt, watched the transformation from lover to leader happen in real time. It was like watching a door close between us. Come back to me, I said. He paused, crossing back to the bed to press a kiss to my forehead. Always. But he didn't come back. Not for 3 days. And when he finally returned, he wasn't alone. The woman with him was stunning, dark-haired and elegant, with the kind of beauty that belonged on magazine covers. She moved through our home like she owned it, her eyes cataloging everything with barely concealed disdain. Sarah, this is Isabella Marchetti, Damien said, his voice carefully neutral. She'll be staying with us for a while. Staying with us? Why? Isabella smiled, a sharp curve of crimson lips that didn't reach her eyes. Because Damien and I are engaged, darling. Didn't he tell you? The world tilted on its axis. Engaged? The word came out strangled. It's not, Damien started. It's exactly what it sounds like, Isabella interrupted smoothly. The Cardenas situation required a diplomatic solution. I am that solution. Damien marries me, our families unite, and everyone avoids an extremely bloody and expensive war. She tilted her head, studying me with cold curiosity. I assume you're the nanny? You'll want to make sure the children's rooms are prepared. We'll be hosting several important guests next week. I looked at Damien. He wouldn't meet my eyes. Could you give us a moment, he said to Isabella. Of course. I'll be in the study. The one with the terrible art. She swept out, leaving destruction in her wake. The silence that followed was deafening. Tell me she's lying, I finally said. Sarah. Tell me this is some kind of game. Some strategy one don't understand. It's not a lie. His voice was hollow. The engagement is real. The marriage will be real. In 4 months, Isabella Marchetti will become Isabella Valerio. I felt like I was falling, like the ground had simply disappeared beneath my feet. You said you loved me. 6 weeks ago, you stood in this room and said. I meant every word. He finally looked at me, and I saw the agony in his eyes. I love you. I will love you until the day I die. But love isn't enough. Not in my world. The Cardenas family was going to start a war. Hundreds would have died. My own people. Innocents. Children. His voice cracked. And Isabella's father made me an offer. peace, in exchange for her hand. I couldn't say no. So you're just going to marry her? Live with her? Have a life with her while I what, raise your children like some kind of glorified servant? Of course not. You would never be. Don't. I held up my hand, tears streaming down my face. Don't try to manage this. Don't try to find a solution that makes everyone happy. There is no solution. You made a choice. You chose your empire over us. I chose to protect the people who depend on me. Including you. Including my daughters. The Cardenas family doesn't make empty threats. If I had refused, if I had let the war happen, you would have been a target. Luna and Sienna would have been targets. I couldn't, he broke off, running his hands through his hair. I couldn't let that happen. I would rather lose you than bury you. You don't get to make that choice for me. Someone has to make the hard choices. Someone has to bear the weight so others don't have to. I looked at him, at this man I had fallen so desperately, stupidly in love with, and I saw the truth. He would always be this. Trapped between love and duty, between desire and obligation. There would always be another threat, another sacrifice, another noble reason why he couldn't choose us. I'm leaving, I said. Sarah, please. No. I can't do this. I can't watch you marry someone else. I can't watch you build a life with her while I'm standing on the sidelines, holding the children and pretending it doesn't destroy me. I took a shaky breath. I love you. God help me, I love you so much it feels like it's going to kill me. But I need to love myself too. And staying here, being second choice, being the thing you had to give up for the greater good. I can't. He didn't try to stop me. Maybe he knew he had no right. Maybe he was already calculating how my absence would affect the children. Maybe he was just too broken to fight anymore. I packed my bags. Kissed Luna and Sienna goodbye while they slept, whispering promises I didn't know if I could keep. And then I walked out the door, into a night that seemed colder and darker than any I had known. 3 years later, I was standing on a stage in Milan, preparing to perform the lead role in La Boheme, when I saw him. The years had changed me. I had finished my degree, had thrown myself into my music with a ferocity born of heartbreak. I had been discovered at a small showcase in Boston by a director who saw something in me that I had almost forgotten existed. I had trained, performed, clawed my way up from chorus roles to supporting parts to, finally, impossibly, this. I was not the woman who had served pancakes in a dying diner. I was Serafina Vance, mezzo-soprano, rising star, critical darling. I had an apartment in New York. A career I was proud of. A life that I had built from the ashes of everything I had lost. But when I saw Damien Valerio sitting in the front row of the Teatro alla Scala, the twins beside him, now 5 years old and heartbreakingly beautiful, I felt every single one of those carefully constructed walls crumble to dust. The performance was a blur. I sang, I acted, I poured every ounce of grief and love and longing into the role of a woman dying of consumption while the man she loved was powerless to save her. When the final curtain fell and the audience erupted, I was trembling so hard I could barely stand. He found me backstage, after the crowds had dispersed, after the well-wishers had finally left me alone. He stood in the doorway of my dressing room, the twins asleep in the arms of a woman I didn't recognize, looking at me like I was a ghost he had never stopped seeing. You were magnificent, he said. What are you doing here? I've been to every performance. Every city, every stage, every production. I've watched you become who you were always meant to be. I stared at him. What are you talking about? Do you remember what you told me, that first morning after the Munich incident? You said that when the threats were eliminated, when the empire was secure, I should consider walking away. He stepped into the room, closing the door behind him. It took me longer than I wanted. Longer than I promised. But I did it. Sarah, I walked away. The marriage never happened. Isabella and I were engaged for exactly 73 days before she found someone who could offer her what I couldn't, which was my whole heart. The Cardenas situation was handled differently. Messier, yes. More costly. But handled. He crossed to stand in front of me, close enough to touch but not touching. I spent 2 years extracting myself from everything. Divesting. Reorganizing. Placing power in the hands of people who could wield it better than I ever could. I'm not out completely. I probably never will be. But I'm not what I was. Why didn't you tell me? 3 years, Damien. 3 years of nothing. Because you needed to become this without me. You needed to prove to yourself that you could. And because I didn't deserve to come to you until I was someone who could offer you more than danger and complication and sacrifice. His voice dropped. I'm still not sure I deserve to come to you now. But I couldn't stay away any longer. I couldn't keep watching you from the shadows while you took the world by storm. I had to tell you. Tell me what? That I never stopped loving you. That every single day we were apart, I thought of you. That I have spent 3 years becoming someone worthy of the woman who saw my demons and stayed anyway. He reached out, his fingers brushing my cheek so gently it hurt. I'm not asking you to take me back. I'm asking if there's even a chance. The smallest possibility that maybe, one day, you could look at me without seeing all the pain I caused you. I thought about the years. The grief. The slow, excruciating process of rebuilding a heart that had been shattered into a million pieces. And then I thought about the nights. The longing. The way I still dreamed of him, woke reaching for someone who wasn't there, felt incomplete in a way that success and acclaim couldn't fill. The twins, I said. Do they remember me? His face cracked into something between a laugh and a sob. Luna asks about you every day. She still has the recording I made of you singing at the diner, before everything fell apart. Sienna calls you the lady from the songs. He paused. I've played them your performances. Every single one. They think you're the most beautiful thing in the world. Tears were streaming down my face now, ruining my stage makeup. I didn't care. I want to see them. They're right outside. I nodded, not trusting my voice. He opened the door, said something quiet to the woman holding them, and then 2 sleepy girls were being carried into the room, their green eyes blinking open. Sawa. Luna's voice was hesitant, confused. Daddy, is that Sawa? From the videos? Yes, baby, Damien said, his voice thick. That's Sarah. She's real? She's real. Luna wiggled until the woman set her down, and then she was running across the room, crashing into my legs with a force that almost knocked me over. I dropped to my knees, gathering her in my arms, pressing my face against her dark hair. You sing pretty, Luna said, her arms tight around my neck. Will you stay this time? I looked up at Damien over her head. At this man who had walked through fire for his children. Who had dismantled an empire because I had asked him to. Who had stayed away for 3 years because he believed I deserved to shine on my own. Yes, I said, and the word felt like a door opening to a future I had never dared to hope for. If you want me to, I'll stay. Sienna had woken up too, and soon I had both girls in my arms, their questions tumbling over each other. Did I really live on a stage? Was it fun singing in front of all those people? Did I like pancakes? Later, after the twins had been taken to the hotel by their caretaker, Damien and I stood alone in that dressing room. I have conditions, I said. Name them. First, we take this slow. I need to trust you again, and that's going to take time. Second, the girls come first. Always. If anything you do ever puts them at risk, I'm gone. Third. I hesitated. Third, I need you to listen to me sing. Really listen. Because that person up there on that stage, she's who I am now. She's who I fought to become. And I need you to love her, not just the ghost of the girl you met in a diner. He stepped closer, taking my hands in his. I do love her. I've watched her grow, watched her triumph, watched her become everything I knew she could be. And I love her even more than I loved the girl in the diner. Because this woman, she didn't just survive. She soared. I kissed him then, in that dressing room that smelled of makeup and flowers and the particular electricity of a performance well done. And when we finally broke apart, both of us breathless, I laughed. What? He asked. I was just thinking about how this all started. A man with 2 babies, sitting in the corner booth of a rundown diner. A waitress who was barely holding on. And now look at us. Look at us, he agreed. We left the theater together, walking into a night filled with Roman stars. Somewhere in the city, our daughters were sleeping. Somewhere in the future, there would be challenges, complications, the lingering shadows of a world that didn't release its hold easily. But in that moment, there was only this: 2 people who had found each other against impossible odds. 2 people who had lost everything and rebuilt it. 2 people who had finally, impossibly, found their way home. The waitress and the mafia boss. Who would have thought? If this story touched your heart, if you stayed until the very end to see how it turned out, I need something from you. Hit that subscribe button right now. Not for me. For the next story, which might be the one someone you love needs to hear. Share this with someone who believes in second chances, in redemption, in the power of love to transform even the darkest hearts. And if you don't, well, imagine the person who needs this message, scrolling past because you didn't share. Imagine them missing the hope that got you through this story. Don't let that happen. Subscribe. Share. And remember, sometimes the most unexpected love stories are the truest ones of all.